baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Greetings, greetings. Welcome. We're so happy that you are here to learn more about the recent history of the 1950s. Perhaps you will recall this organization with a joyful heart, as what Jackie and I do, from having been involved with just kind of, you might say, the fringes of it in the 1950s. But this is a great fun chat. It will inspire you, and it will probably take you back to that time in America when charity was very, very important. Jackie, can you go on from there?
Hello, greetings, viewers. Please do note that purple banner below, www. While the Windmill Watched, is where you'll find all sorts of information about the authors, which happen to be Janine and me, the vendors, where you can buy our book. And by the way, the book is up in that right-hand corner, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. And you'll also be able to look through all of the 186 or so, is it, fun chats that we've had. So we thank you for being here, and I'd like to introduce you to our guest. So many of our viewers will be familiar with the phrase, "He ain't heavy, Father, he's my brother." Our guest, Tom Lynch, will be able to tell us the origin of that phrase and many more historical facts covering the 108-year-old history of Boys Town of Omaha, Nebraska. Tom was born in Omaha in 1960 and has lived in the city his entire life. He's a part of a large Irish Catholic family and helped to raise several of his nieces and nephews. A graduate of the University of Nebraska, majoring in history, he joined Boys Town after graduation in 1986. An employee for over 39 years, he is currently the director of community programs, overseeing the homes, museum programs, the volunteers, and assisting with the canonization process for Boys Town founder, the servant of God, Father Edward Flanagan. So, Tom, we welcome you to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Thank you for having me on today. It's an honor.
Oh, you're welcome. We're looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So, to begin with, we're asking a big question, and that is, please give us a condensed version of a 108-year-old history of Boys Town up to the decade of the 50s, and then we'll get to specifics of the 50s later on.
Boys Town was founded by Father Flanagan in 1917, and it was a program to work with boys that nobody really wanted. They were homeless boys, abandoned boys, boys who got in trouble with the courts, and no one really wanted them. So Father Flanagan started a revolutionary home. He welcomed any boy, regardless of race, religion, to come and live with him. And he created a program where kids were going to come and have love and a spiritual life, education, be taught a trade. And from the very beginning, it changed the way children were treated, just not in America, but around the world. And it flourished all the way up through the 1920s and 30s. He moved to our present location in 1921 and actually did create a village. So right now I'm talking to you from the village of Boys Town in Nebraska. We have our own community here, our own zip code, our own school system, our own fire and police department. And we have staff here. We have over 300 boys and girls living with us today in the village of Boys Town. So the history of Boys Town continues on today with our boys and girls and all the programs we have across the United States. We serve over 4 million kids and families every year through all the various Boys Town programs. But the 1950s was a very important historical point in the history of Boys Town during those decades.
Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate then just on the 50s and all the services and what changes took place?
Well, Father Flanagan always had a dream to create a village for 1,000 boys. And when he created Boys Town, we're independent. We're not part of any religious community or government program. We're an independent children's home. So he had to raise his own money to fund the program and keep it open. And through the Great Depression, you can imagine hundreds of boys wanted to come live here. He had to turn them away, and it broke his heart. So he said, I'm going to make a village for 1,000 children. So in the late 1940s, he bought over 1,000 acres of land, and he began a massive building project. So by the 1948, 1949, he was on the cusp of opening all these buildings. 100 new buildings had been built here for the boys, new cottages, a huge field house, everything. And unfortunately, he passed away and didn't get live to see it completed. But by 1950, we had over 900 boys living here in the village of Boys Town. So you can imagine a community where children are aged 9 to 18 living here. We had about 500 grade school boys and about 500 teenage boys up to age 18 here. So you can imagine it was a very, very lively place here in Boys Town, Nebraska for the boys.
Yes. Tom, I had the wonderful experience of watching the original film Boys Town the other day with Spencer Tracy and who's the little guy?
Mickey Rooney.
Yeah, Mickey Rooney. He played the character of Whitey. That was it was so fascinating to see. And the heart that Father Flanagan had, he really never took no for an answer in regard to raising money or establishing Boys Town. And that's the great man that he was and portrayed in that picture. It sounds as though that's the great man that he actually lived to be.
Very true, very true. He took in children nobody wanted. They had been rejected by their families, by the courts. Some have gotten in trouble and had legal cases against them. They are basically boys who had nowhere to go. No one wanted them. And he opened his Boys Town for those boys. And when they came here, they flourished. Many of them, for the first time, were able to go to school, have meals, clean clothing, just many things people take for granted in their lives. These boys had really never had before. And now they had it here in the community of Boys Town. And the main thing they had was love and brotherhood, because when they lived here at Boys Town, it became a large family, especially once we had 900 boys here. Many of them, this became their family, was their Boys Town boys they grew up with in their cottages or their dormitory. And up until today, they still consider Boys Town to be their home.
So how did he go about gathering a staff that was of the right mindset? I mean, they're giving people.
He was, Father Flanagan just would not hire anyone to come work here at Boys Town. You had to be an individual that had empathy for the boys that were going to come live here because they had issues and problems in their lives. And the old style, especially through the 20s and 30s, the idea in many institutions was to use physical force to hit the children, yell at them, call them names, and lock them in rooms and bars. And he said, you can't beat a child and expect them to change their behavior. You have to do it through modification. And modification was treating them humanely and, again, with love. And then you discovered when children accept that, they're going to stop that behavior. And he proved it, being very, very successful with the boys that came to live here at Boys Town. We have no fences or gates around our community, even today. So you can imagine he had 900 boys living here with no fences or gates, because he said you can't lock in your family members. And the same guiding spirit he created 100 years ago, we still use here in the village of Boys Town, working with our boys and girls today.
Tom, when siblings came to Boys Town, were they often living in the same village or the same apartment or the same home, or were they split up according to age, or how did that work?
In the 1950s, again, we really didn't have the social programs like we have today. So you would have a single parent, a mom or a dad, maybe have 5, 8, sometimes 10 children, and they just didn't have the resources to take care of them. So they would make the agonizing decision that they'd have to send some of their children away to orphanage type program. And Boys Town is not technically an orphanage. We're a home for children, a therapeutic home. So we would actually have groups of brothers come here. And one family came, about 4 boys. One of the boys was 6, and that's really not a little too young for us, but we agreed to take him in. So the 2 younger brothers lived in the dormitory with grade school boys, and the 2 older brothers were able to live in the high school department on campus in their own cottage, what we called, with the other teenage boys. But they were here together as a family unit, so they were to see each other throughout the day and be part of that. And then the 1950s here in the village of Boys Town, just after everything was completed by Father Flanagan, we had many opportunities for the boys to engage in sports programming and music and arts. And we have our farming program. Kids wanted to be farmers. Anything the boys wanted to do, we had the opportunity for them to do that.
Wonderful. In the movie, it showed where the communication legislative part of Boys Town all was in the hands of the boys. There was a mayor and council from that point. Is that how it has always been?
It was. Father Flanagan began that back in the 1930s because he wanted to teach the kids civic responsibility. And we are a legal big village, and so we needed a mayor. So he began the process of having the boys have elections, and they vote one of their own in and be the mayor, and they had a city council. And that program continues all the way up to today. We're actually going to have an election here in May, and the only people who can vote are the boys and girls that live here. The adults, we are not allowed to vote for the mayor. It's strictly one of their own. And this boy or girl today will represent them. But through the 1940s and through the 50s, the kids would be the mayor, and they would be in charge of the 900 other boys here on campus, advising how they should live and work here. And it taught the kids civic responsibility. And some of them didn't have the opportunity to vote when they went back home due to the race of their religion and through the 40s and 50s. So this is the way to let all the boys know everybody had the opportunity to be free and independent and have the chance to vote and express themselves.
Have you found that after these boys graduated from Boys Town, that especially those who were in leadership positions, that they have gone on to do great and mighty things?
Definitely. We had boys who were with us who went on to serve in the military. One of them was Commander Lloyd Booker, skipper of the Pueblo that was captured by North Koreans in 1969. They suffered terrible abuse, but he grew up here at Boys Town, and he learned those skills of being part of a team and working together. And then we had other boys who went on to be leaders in faith, different faith communities, and then some in politics, and then in business, and in education especially. So they used those skills they learned here, because in the 1950s, you lived in a cottage, and you'd have 25 other guys living with you in what we called our cottages on campus. These were homes that were created. And there would be boys of all different races and religions all living together in one building. So you learned pretty quickly how to get along with everybody. And there really was not much difference in the way children behaved once the other guys moved in and lived together. They realized everyone was the same.
So was there a house parent that lived in each cottage or not?
There was. Back in the 1950s, we had close to 30 what we called cottages, and each cottage had about 25 boys. And in each cottage, there was one adult that lived with them, and he was like they called the counselor, and he'd oversee the cottage, the boys who lived there. But the boys themselves would elect like a house commissioner, and that house commissioner would be in charge of the other boys, making sure they made their beds and kept the rooms clean, and they functioned as a family unit there. So they would kind of work together there. And the homes had bedrooms, and each bedroom had about 4 boys per bedroom. And the cottages are all brick, or cottages are stone, and they're Tudor style, and they were designed personally by Father Flanagan. Everyone is different. They're not all the same. And that's what's unique about Boys Town is we don't want everything to be the same. Everyone's an individual. So even our architecture here is built to make like a village. So if you come and visit us, you'll see the cottages, and the boys lived in those. And then especially at holidays, they would decorate them for Christmas. They have contests, and they would put up train sets, and they would build elaborate displays. And that's how many of the boys learned to celebrate Christmas, was here at Boys Town, because we celebrate all the holidays with the boys, just like we boys and girls even today.
Sure. Since the inception of Boys Town and through the 50s and today, has the daily schedule changed at all, or is it pretty much the same? Father Flanagan laid it out, and that worked, and so you're staying with it.
It pretty much is the same since the 1950s. In the 1950s, again, with 900 boys here, we had a very organized program of going to school every day, and then they had worship services on Sundays for the children, and we still follow those today. We have a strong sports program like they did back in the 1950s. Our sports programs, they were leaders in sports across the Midwest region. Local schools didn't want to play us, though, because we had mixed race teams. So Father Flanagan had to take our teams across the country, and they go to Detroit Catholic Central. They would go to Rochester, New York, and they would play football games. And eventually we joined the Nebraska Leagues in the 1960s. But even through the 50s, our boys were traveling across America to play sports. And we have the bus they rode on called the Flex, and it's on display in our museum here at Boys Town. So you can come and actually tour the museum and get on the Flex just like the boys did when they traveled across the country in the 1950s. But it was an exciting time here at Boys Town in the 50s for our sports teams. And again, the concept and the routine of life created by Father Flanagan, we carry out today still in the village of Boys Town.
Well, think how wonderful those experiences were for those young boys to be able to get on a bus with assistance, with coaching, with and be able to go across the country. Experiences that many children never had. In
Uh,
the,
Definitely, yeah. Our children, they would go they would go on those tours, and then our choir would travel. They'd go on national tours and even international tours. So they got to travel across the United States and see different communities, and so they had great eye-opening events by doing that. And that's part of the Boys Town program, is providing our boys with opportunities that they would not have had before. And through the 1950s, they could do that through the music program and sports. And even in agriculture, we used to have livestock shows here. And we had a massive farm operation here at Boys Town in the 1950s. We produced 90% of our own food right here in the village of Boys Town. We had dairy herds, we had beef cattle, we had chickens, gardens. And so the boys would take their cattle across the United States to stock shows. And we have numerous pictures of them doing that. We have ribbons, boxes and boxes of ribbons they won for doing that. So every boy had the opportunity who came here to fulfill their desire of doing something unique. But that was all part of the program, 1950s. We believe in keeping children busy in something positive. We call it catching them being good. And that's what
I like
in the 50s was in reinforcing positive things for the kids to do. And many of the boys, this was their dream place, happiest times of their lives. Many of them were living here at Boys Town in the 1950s.
And you had quite a few children come from other countries too, didn't you? Can you talk about that?
Especially in the 1950s, after the Iron Curtain fell in Europe, and then the Korean War happened, there were orphans, war orphans. So there were several Korean war orphan children that came here to Boys Town. Soldiers would find these orphans in Korea, and they couldn't take care of them. So they would come to live with us at Boys Town. So there were 2 or 3 that actually did that. And then once the Iron Curtain fell in the 1950s, we had teenagers alone escaping over from the East. And so they had no place to live. So they would send them to live here at Boys Town. So there was an international group of boys coming to live here at Boys Town with the other kids. And they got a true American experience living here at Boys Town, because it was, you can imagine what it was like here with the celebrations and how everyone lived. And they very quickly absorbed and became part of the American life once they were living here at Boys Town.
How did those refugees over in Europe get connected to the opportunity to come to Boys Town?
Well, Boys Town is an internationally known program for children, and individual soldiers or just individuals would know of a child needing help. They'd write to Boys Town saying, this child needs help. Can he come live with you? And so we investigate it and see if there's a better program or if we could actually help that children. And then we would take them in. So our children, even today, they're referred from the courts, they're referred from ministers, rabbis, just a wide variety of people, individuals can refer a child to come live at Boys Town even today. And we investigate to see if we're an appropriate place for that child. And that's how those children would come live with us. And many of them, this was their opportunity to succeed in life. And many of them did that. Once they came to live here, they went on to have productive lives here in America.
Sure.
So I have a question about the employees. What did the employees have training ahead of time? This is our model. This is our motto. This must be the mindset of you, besides having empathy. Is there some sort of training process for employees?
Today, we have an extensive training process, especially for people who are going to live in the cottages with our boys and girls. We call them family teachers. But even for the staff that are here every day, like myself, when I joined 39 years ago, we give initial rules and concepts of how you're going to live here at Boys Town with the boys and girls and how they're to be treated. And so that is special training we receive. And you have to have someone, again, who has empathy, that would understand the behaviors of the boys and girls when they live with us. In the 1950s, they actually had a number of staff living here, because in the 50s, Boys Town was way out from the city of Omaha, like 10 miles. Sure. So having a car driving back and forth, some people couldn't afford that. So on the grounds, they had a dormitory where male staff would live, and they had another one for female staff. And then we had sisters here, an order of nuns that would come and live here at Boys Town, and the Franciscan sisters. So all these individuals were living here with the boys on the grounds, and they all knew exactly what was expected of them, how to interact and behave with the boys and girls here. And again, it was all part of that community that Boys Town created. Because here in the dining hall, I'm actually in the Hall of History Museum today, which was a dining hall built in 1939. We had a crew of staff that were feeding the boys 365 days a year, 3 times a day. The boys had to be fed. So there was a dedicated staff of cooks here doing that. And then you had religious individuals at the chapels, and people take care of the grounds, and our teachers. So there was a whole village dedicated just for the care of the children that were here in the village of Boys Town. And it very much was like a large family.
Yes.
Atmosphere.
Tom, this is such a great program. What is there anything else like that in this country?
There are similar programs like Boys Town. There's the Hershey Home in Pennsylvania, has a kind of a similar program to us. And then there's some other smaller child care programs across America. But we are the largest in the United States, and we are the people come to us for concepts, ideas, and theories, and we share our programming here in the United States and even internationally. We have a lot of international organizations that are interested in Boys Town even today. Boys Town programs are still opening. The most recent one opened in Nigeria just 2 years ago, and it's based on Father Flanagan's ideas and theories and concepts. So they're still carrying on today. And it's basically treat children with love and kindness and have expectations for behaviors, and you can change a child. And that's what we did here at Boys Town all through the 1950s. We had one, I can tell you, one little boy came to us in the 50s. He was 11 years old. He came from Iowa. He was in a lockup facility, had gotten in trouble and was in jail. And then he was sent here to live at Boys Town. And mom was a single mom. And so he was here just a few months. And they said, well, Christmas is coming. We're going to do a pageant. And our pageants at Boys Town at Christmas time were televised live nationally over CBS national rate television for many, many years. So they said, you're going to be an angel in the pageant. So he said, okay. So they dressed him up like an angel, and he let his mom know, and his mom had to go to the neighbors and watch him on TV because she couldn't afford a TV. So he was marching down the aisle in the 1950s in our chapel as an angel. And he said at that point, the Holy Spirit came over him. And then all the issues, all the trouble he had in his life kind of went away. And he went on to get married, have a family, and become a deacon in the Catholic Church. And it all came from that experience of the chapel in the 1950s. So that's why we call that a magic moment, almost what we call a Father Flanagan moment, where he touches the lives of our kids. And it still happens even today in the village of Boys Town.
Oh, boy, that is a take your breath away kind of experience lesson. So,
Tom, you have this position now, Director of Community Programs. Have you always had that since you started working there?
When I came to Boys Town 39 years ago, I was just out of college, and I was what's called a Hall of History assistant. So I just helped out here in the museum. And then over the years, I assumed more responsibility. And now today I'm Director of Community Programs. So I had that opportunity. And 39 years have gone very quickly. You think it'd be a drag, but here at Boys Town, again, having the boys and girls here and interacting with our alumni who come back and tell stories, especially the guys from the 50s, you hear what their lives were like. So it's just like no ordinary job. And so it's been a privilege to be here that long and to be part of the Boys Town community.
Mm-hmm. If someone comes to Boys Town Village to tour it, what can they expect to see?
When they come to visit, we have our visitor center. They can go there and they can get their map through the village of Boys Town. And we actually have an app called Boys Town. You can go online and download the app, visit Boys Town, and it will describe what you can see. And then you'll go through the village. You can tour the Hall of History Museum. It's an award-winning museum. You can see the Oscar Spencer Tracy won for the movie Boys Town. Mm-hmm. Tour Father Flanagan's historic home that was built in 1927, where he lived. It's a historic house museum. You can go to the Catholic chapel and see Father Flanagan's tomb. And then you can see our beautiful grounds, which are starting to wake up right now. It's spring happening here in Nebraska. And it's a beautiful campus. Father Flanagan laid it all out, and it looks like a university campus. If someone comes to visit, it's very large. We're a square mile size village, and people are able to visit and see how our children live here in the village of Boys Town today and understand what a unique place Boys Town is.
Now, how about talk to us about when girls were allowed in 1997?
When Father Flanagan created Boys Town in 1917, he went to the courts here in Douglas County in Nebraska and sat in the courtroom. And he discovered the children nobody wanted were the teenage boys or pre-teenage boys, because someone always wanted the younger children to go to an orphanage, and girls someone wanted them to be a cook or a maid. And so they would take them in. So no one the only children nobody wanted were the boys. We realized as we got into the late 1960s and into the 70s, issues were facing girls similar to what boys had, and there really were not that many programs for them. So in 1979, Boys Town opened our program to girls. So they've been part of our Boys Town program now for almost 30 years. And when they came, they modified some of our homes to accommodate the girls here. So in the village today, it's 50-50. We have about 250 girls living with us, and they live in the homes and on campus, just like the boys do today.
Mhm. Was it hard to incorporate the girls in with the boys after such a rich history of just boys?
Well, some of our alumni did not like it, but change has to happen, and that's what we tell them.
Yes.
Girls need to be part of our program, and it's more like the real world too, because our boys are going to leave and go out in the world and interact with everyone. So it was important that they be here. So the change was not that great. They are just treated just like the boys. We have strict rules of how the children interact themselves once they're here on campus. And so we just continue on just like any normal school would have, with boys and girls going to school together. And we've had girls be mayors, and there's some of our sports leaders. And so it's all part of just a normal high school experiences. We make it as much as normal as possible for our boys and girls today.
Do the children, are they only allowed to live there for so many years?
The average stay for our boys and girls today is about 18 months. When you get back to the 1950s, the length of stay was much longer, because at that point it became a long-term residential program. And that's really not what Father Flanagan wanted, but our director at the time, Monsignor Wagner, created that program. So boys would come at age like 13 or 14, and they would stay 5-6 years here in the village of Boys Town. And so this is in the 1950s, their home. Because today we encourage our boys and girls to go home if they can for visits. But back at that time, they would live their entire childhood right here in the village of Boys Town. And it had great opportunities for them here to get skills and learn a trade and education. But sometimes, they lost contact with their biological families, which today we know that's important for them to try to keep a bond as much as possible. But back in the 1950s, the boys would come here, and the guys in their cottages were their brothers. And if you ever have the chance to come back for one of our alumni conventions, we're going to have one this summer. In fact, you see these men who are now in their 80s, and they call these men are all different races, all different backgrounds, and they're their brothers because they all lived together here in the village of Boys Town.
Well, one thing that Jackie and I remember from the 1950s was when we would get Christmas stamps from Boys Town. And of course, it was our job to lick them on the outside of the envelope. But can you tell us about that program? Is it still ongoing?
Yes, the Boys Town seals began back actually with Father Flanagan. And then by the 1950s, they were mailing out millions of them every year across the United States. And they had our Two Brothers image on it, because the Two Brothers image was something Father Flanagan commissioned in 1943 to be painted. And it's actually based on the true story of a little boy that came here in 1920. He was a little boy that had polio, and he had heavy braces on his legs, and he could barely walk. So one of the older boys would carry him through the village of Boys Town. And that's where Father Flanagan came up with "He ain't heavy, he's my brother." And that's even today our motto here at Boys Town, because even though our children are not blood brothers and sisters, they help each other along throughout the day and throughout the year and into even adulthood. And so that's what that symbol of one child carrying another one represents. And those were mailed out to millions of people across the United States. And even today, we have visitors coming in saying, "I remember putting those seals on my family's Christmas cards." And we still have a form of the seals that go out today. Today, they have birds on them, and they have different designs. But the Two Brothers is our traditional one. Okay. And the boys actually, they had thousands of these stamps, because stamp collecting was one of the hobbies they had here in the village of Boys Town in the 1950s.
Sure.
So tell us about the big ball.
Well, stamp collecting began with Father Flanagan. He was a stamp collector, and he gave his stamp collection to the boys. And then in the 1950s, we had just thousands and thousands of pages of stamps left over from the Two Brothers. So they said, let's do something unique. We're going to make a ball of stamps. So the boys started with like a tennis ball or golf ball. There's great debate actually what started it. And they started to put layer upon layer of the stamps on this golf ball or tennis ball. And it grew and grew and grew until the outer edges. And then on the outer edges, we have people donate to us stamps from all over the world thousands of them every year. So the boys began to take those stamps and put them on the outer edges, and they ended up creating the largest ball of stamps in the world. It's in Ripley's, believe it or not. And it's on display here in the village of Boys Town at our visitor center. And it's a very unique artifact. And we have people come just to see that. Just that's all they come is to come to the village to see that and move on. But it was created by the boys and our stamp club. And so it's a beautiful, unique artifact that we have here in the village of Boys Town. And it represents, we had numerous clubs in the 1950s keep the boys busy. We had architectural, we had agricultural, architectural, we had religious clubs, we had choir clubs, just everything, French clubs, kids who made model cars, just everything to keep the boys busy throughout that time period. And that was all part of the idea of giving them something positive, because we always say a hobby can turn into a trade. And so that's why we try to do that with our children today. But through the 1950s, the boys were making all different types of crafts and things here in the village of Boys Town.
Is there any additional fundraising promotion that Boys Town does now in today's world?
In today's world, we still send out our mailing campaigns. People get them like calendars and seals, and now everything's going digital. So now we're having emphasis to have more digital opportunities for people to support Boys Town. And there's different ways they can help support. We are building a new hospital complex in the village because we have a huge hospital program here. We serve children with autism, children who have hearing difficulties, just a wide spectrum of health issues affecting children. And then we also have our new, what's called Mary Dowd Society, and it's helping to maintain our Catholic chapel, because our Catholic chapel here is dedicated just for our boys and girls. So the whole number of children, our people attended, parishioners, is only about 50 people. And that's because that's the children who live here and some of the staff, because otherwise it's just private. So they help to maintain that chapel. And then we have our Protestant chapel here on the grounds. And we have a Jewish synagogue nearby and a Muslim center for our Muslim children. So it's all part of that concept of having all faith opportunities for our children when they live here in the village of Boys Town, going back to Father Flanagan.
Omaha has just grown to surround Boys Town, if I'm correct on that. How has that impacted the Boys Town itself?
Well, back in the 1950s, we had almost 2,000 acres of land here in West Omaha. And so many of our boys who were here in the 50s, they remember that. We were way, way out in the middle of the country. And people used to say it's a 10-mile drive to get to Boys Town. And so we were way out from the city. And then gradually over the decades, the city has surrounded us now. So we're actually in the middle of the city of Omaha now, because city of Omaha has grown so quickly. And we sold off a lot of that land. So we're down to our township that we have today. The impact is we're more of an urban campus. So we had a huge farm program in the 50s. We were, again, raising our own dairy herds, our cattle, chickens, all that had to go away because we're an urban campus. And then health laws did us in too, because we have children who come from all across the country. And they said, well, milk has to be pasteurized a certain way. The meat has to be processed a certain way. And so it was just the health laws kind of stopped us from doing a lot of internal farming programming. So that's why those programs were discontinued. And then that land was sold. And now we have developments surrounding us. We have a new development that's going to be a $1.5 billion development just west of us on our old farm. And they're going to have 5,000 people living on that property eventually. Once it's completed, it's going to be its own self-contained community. So we're now surrounded by the city of Omaha itself. We planted trees to kind of create our own little perimeter around the village of Boys Town. But now we're an urban campus. So we've had to increase our security for our boys and girls here in the village of Boys Town because of that.
But still no fences or gates to keep the children. Yes.
We look that because children come to us. And in the 1950s, we have many stories of alumni who would walk to Boys Town, and they talk about sleeping in the ditches by the property in the 1950s. And they'd wake up in the morning and they'd walk onto the grounds and ask one of the boys where they could, how they could become part of Boys Town. And they'd be pointed to our admission building, and they'd go over to the admission building. But even today, we still have children who come to us that way. We have a boy come to us from a local high school. He drove over one day, said he didn't want to go home. His home life was so terrible. He wanted to come live with us here at Boys Town. So that's why we never want fences or gates put up, because we want children the opportunity to come to us if they need to. And they still do every year. We call them pilgrims. And so every year we get a few pilgrims that come in to see us. But especially in the 50s, a lot of children came that way. They would just walk or hitchhike to come to Boys Town.
We had an awesome home life, but boy, what you offer sounds pretty good.
It's like utopia.
Yes.
In the 1950s, Father Flanagan designed for the boys a bowling alley. So they had what's called the malt shop. So in the 1950s, the high school boys could go to this building on campus, and they could get hamburgers and hot dogs and malts, and they had pool tables and ping pong tables, and then they had a 3-lane bowling alley. And then the boys got the bowl, and then some of the boys were the pin sitters. So that was their job. They got to set the pins. And we actually have some of the pins surviving from the bowling alley because it's no longer in use anymore. But that's where the high school boys could go and hang out. It was at what's called the malt shop. And then the younger grade school boys, they had their own little places here on campus too, where they could go. Usually the third floor of their dormitories, there were crafts rooms, and they could do crafts, make models, and just do all types of things to keep busy.
So
exciting.
Boys that are children that went through high school, and how did they get prepared for college if they chose to go that route? Were there advanced classes in what, chemistry or math or anything, or what? How were they prepared?
They were in the 1950s, again, when we had about 500 boys here in the high school. They had advanced classes for those boys because they are getting prepared. Some wanted to go on to universities. So some of our kids went to Cornell, they went to Notre Dame, different universities like that. We had scholarships for them. And then if they wanted to go to local community colleges or local universities, we'd help them prepare them. We had fantastic teachers that would take extra time and energy to do that. And many of the boys from the 1950s said if it wasn't for those teachers encouraging them and helping them, they probably would not have made it to college, because those guys were on their own. And then for the boys that wanted to do a trade, we have a massive trade program. Even today, we teach kids automotive and electrical work at that time, radios, and they would prepare the boys to go on printing. And many of them left Boys Town in the 1950s, started their own businesses, their own barbershop, print shop, and it became their career, and they had very good lives based on those skills they learned here at Boys Town in the 1950s. So we gave the boys every opportunity to go out in the world and try have a skill, both academic or vocational, if they wanted to do that. And many of them succeeded and had stable lives because of that opportunity here at Boys Town. And we still do that today here at Boys Town. Today, we work with our boys and girls, preparing them to go off to college. Our student who works for us here in the Hall of History after school, he's going to graduate in a few weeks. He's going to go to the University of Wyoming. So he's got that opportunity to do that. So we encourage them to carry that out. It's really hard, though. You know, can you imagine leaving at 18? You're on alone in the world. You don't have anyone to call and say, hey, I need help with this or help with that. That's why we have a program called Successful Futures. And we try to help those boys and girls once they leave us.
Well, Tom, it's probably not excruciatingly hard for the boys to leave. It's probably hard for the staff to let them go.
That too.
Yes.
Tom, we're at the end of our punch on. My goodness, this has been exciting and interesting.
Rewarding.
Yes, if there is a highlight in your mind about Boys Town, what would that be?
My highlight would be Father Flanagan created a community where all children were welcome. He created one of the first intentionally integrated communities in America. So the boys would come here in the 1950s. Many of them had suffered abuse in their lives, maybe discrimination to their race, their religion. They were really beat down. And when they came here to live at Boys Town, everyone was equal. Everyone lived together as a family unit. And it's actually a role model for America, what America could be. And that's why many of the boys who lived here went on to try to work in their communities to foster acceptance and working together as a team. And those are all skills the kids learned here at Boys Town through the 1950s. And many of them said they wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for Boys Town. It gave them that opportunity to have a stable, safe place to live. And so I think it's just an example of what could happen in America. And we still carry it out today with our boys and girls here in the village of Boys Town. Even today, everyone lives together here as a family unit. We don't get any special training for it. And none of the boys are specially trained. They just came and they said, this is how we live. And you're part of the Boys Town program today. And so many of them came to accept it and live as a family unit. So it's a beautiful opportunity to see that when people come and visit, they're amazed by the diversity you can see in our images going all the way back to the 1920s. And that's all part of the magic with the village of Boys Town. And people are always encouraged to come and visit. We're open 7 days a week, 365 days a year, except for the major holidays. You can come out. We're a National Historic Landmark District. the only one in the state of Nebraska. So they can tour and they can learn more about our history and what goes on in the village of Boys Town today.
And as you were talking here, I thought, and think of the imprint that you have made on those young people to go out and have their own families and be with the responsibility and the love and care that you've given them. Awesome. Kudos.
Awesome.
It's wonderful.
Inspiring. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, thank you so much. Jackie, can you close our program today?
Folks, thank you for joining us. And we are grateful that you've learned one more thing about the wonderful 1950s and the continuing, not residue, but the continuing influence of the 50s in our life today. So until next time, tell your friends, even your relatives, about this 1950s fun chat. Until next time, toodaloo.
Bye-bye.